Hi, it's Joel here from Coaches Rising, and this dialogue is part of our pre-summit series for the Coaches Rising Summit. You can find out more about that, and we've got an amazing lineup of transformational coaches taking part by heading to www.coachesrisingsummit.com. So in this dialogue, I'm speaking with James Flaherty, and he's the founder of New Ventures West. And in this dialogue, James talks about how, as coaches, we can settle into ourselves and awaken the wisdom of our heart, which in turn catalyzes the awakening of our clients' hearts and brings a powerful intelligence into the coaching conversation. So welcome, James. It's great to hear your voice again. I know seeing you for the first time, but we spoke a few years back.
That's
How's
right.
things today?
It's a nice day today. I just was on a one-day Zen retreat yesterday, and that was preceded by a week of vacation north of here in a beautiful forest of redwood trees. So I'm doing well today.
And,
how are things?
Good. Yeah, I'm well. I've also just kind of getting back into the groove after some retreats and time out over summer, and I think I got what I needed, which was the feeling of wanting to get back into work again. And that's what I'm noticing today after quite a period of not wanting to work at all. So,
okay.
Well, it's great you're going to be on the faculty of the upcoming Coaches Rising Summit. I'm very excited about that. And there's a couple of questions I wanted to pose to you today. And I know we just talked about that before, and you were kind of challenging me on the question. So, and I do want to pose it again and see where the hell it takes us, you know. And the first question that I had was, if you were to give one piece of, if you were to say one thing, like give one piece of wisdom to coaches listening that you think would help them become more effective as a coach, what would you say to them?
Yeah. So what we were talking about before was that this is so much the habit of our mind, imagining that there's one something, there's one magic phrase or one view or one approach or one something that would do it. And so I already just said I was at a Zen retreat yesterday. So one of the premises of Zen is this idea that everything is connected to everything else. So maybe that's the one piece of wisdom, is not imagining that there's one piece of wisdom. That in fact, once we say there is wisdom, this is the piece of wisdom, we start not paying attention to everything else. I think that would be the trouble with saying, here's the piece of wisdom to pay attention to. Well, how do you know what's the moment to pay attention to it? I mean, we can't.
Yeah.
There isn't something that's going to be fitting for every situation.
I mean, what I like about what you're saying is it seems to point towards the difference between coaching as a kind of methodology or as a tool I use on a client, and coaching as a way of being, or as like my whole self is an instrument and I'm just responding to what's alive there in the moment. If you get that distinction that I'm
Of course, right. And there's so many experts in the world who say, I have the universal tool here that will fix anything that's broken. And of course, there isn't such a thing as that. But I like the approach of way of being. That seems much fuller and richer and deeper, as long as it doesn't say my way of being that doesn't include the other person. So I think, so maybe we're saying the same thing if we talk longer, Joel, that what coaching mostly is as far as I can comprehend it, it's being cooperating with what life wants to have happen. It's harmonizing with life instead of just deciding what should happen and this is what I'm going to make happen. because that just sets up all the contrary forces against us. Plus, whenever we act in disharmony, we cause trouble for other people. We cause toxicity in the world to rise. We cause all kinds of waste to occur. It's not a good idea.
Mm. I live this because I think it's quite profound what you're pointing towards, like how do you work with that in your own experience with a client? Is it just through the years of experience that you've become more and more aware of how you may start to impose on what should happen, or are you consciously looking for that? Or...
Yeah, it's a matter of uh, I was talking to my friend last night. I don't know if you've ever run across Russ Hudson. Russ Hudson is one of the big Enneagram guys in the world. So we were talking last night. He's in New York, and he's coming to the Bay Area and doing a class, I guess on Wednesday. Anyway, he was talking about relatedness, and that we are always in a field of relatedness. And it's the field that we are in that always does the work. So coaching, the way that I take it, means opening myself as much as possible to this field, or letting the field open me up to what's going on in the interaction with the person, and letting that guide what occurs, which means coaching sessions from person to person, of course, are quite different. And also with the same person over time are different, because life keeps moving and we're in a dynamic universe where things are not ever the same. So it isn't that I have this rule called don't have an agenda that some coaching schools have, which I appreciate the intention behind it. It seems an impossible, in some ways, I think often a silly task. Like I have no preference about anything. It isn't a matter of that. It's a matter of being with the client in the moment and seeing what is arriving there, and can I set aside as much as possible my own history, which isn't, of course, fully possible, but at least quiet it down enough so that I can be in the moment with the client and see what's there. Mm-hmm. Clients will, of course, have tons of things to say. Are you a coach yourself? I don't even know that.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So I don't even need to tell you these things. So the clients come with a whole life and an intentionality and a direction and hopes and dreams and worries and fears, and so all that. But all that gets immediately changed when they meet someone, and they'll tell us certain parts of it, and they'll shade it in a particular way, and they'll give it a different emphasis because of the relational field that happens uniquely between two people.
Mm. I mean, I love it, and actually, I can sort of that field starts to become more tangible right now for me as I connect to you as well.
Right. Exactly. Right.
I can feel a sort of aliveness and presence, that, and a little bit of fear of the unknown, of like what may emerge as well, coming in to my experience.
Right.
And as a coach, I guess the question, this is one I live with, which I want to ask you, is how do you combine, and maybe you're going to challenge the premise of my question, but, so there's this being in relationship to my client in the moment, being present in this way we're talking about, and then there is a sort of maybe this agenda, or they come to me because they want to make some change, and I might have my own ideas about how that change could happen, or they might, and so there's a destination, or there's an intention for a destination or a longing, and there's this kind of presence and spontaneity and unknownness. And I'm wondering how you work with those together, or even if that makes sense, what I'm trying to say. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe a way of talking about coaching is being with someone so that a different kind of intelligence arises in the relatedness than the client would bring or the coach would bring, and then trusting that intelligence. Because like I was just saying a few moments ago, it's rare that a client shows up and says, well, I don't want anything. Then, okay, then what are we talking about? It could be a fascinating conversation, but usually, as you said, clients come with something they want, a possibility they want to address, or a problem they want to solve, or a relationship they want to have be better, and so on. Yes, but then I think the spontaneous inquiry is why? Why that? Of all the things, why that? And is that really the most truthful expression of the longing of the heart, or if we want to say it that way, or the direction that life is going?
Yeah.
Or is it a distorted explanation that won't, even if it was successful in being achieved, wouldn't fulfill what was the direction of the longing?
I love it. Do you? Because I think that question's been on my mind recently. Is like spending more time on, like, for the sake of what or why, you know? Because I think sometimes or often clients are wanting, they want things for reasons which may, under examination, be, for example, they want to feel special or they want to be seen in some way, and that's why they want to achieve a certain thing. And then that's not examined or questioned. So this question of going into why would you want that seems so important to me.
Exactly. Right, exactly. Because sometimes, as we already said, it might be disappointing even if it was achieved. And that path leads to lots of cynicism when people achieve what they go after and then it doesn't fulfill them, and they start to conclude that, well, then therefore nothing is worthwhile, nothing is fulfilling, it's all nonsense. But it's really because they, like almost all of us, have never learned to listen to ourselves, to know ourselves. So we just mostly know ourselves by what our culture tells us is important, and we have the goals that people who are around our age and in this socioeconomic group wants. And we feel like that's totally normal, and it is normal, but it's not. It doesn't come from a deep contact with ourselves. But most of us are too scattered to have a very coherent sense of ourselves. You know, we're super busy, and we keep engaging in activities that split us, that pull us into many different parts.
Yeah.
So, as you know, with a client, you could ask the client that question. The line of inquiry that you started to bring up is, why is it that you want the promotion? Okay. Well, 5 minutes into it, they'll say, well, it isn't that I only want that promotion. Well, part of me is afraid of having the promotion, and part of me thinks I'm not worthy. And so another part of me feels like I should have had it already. And part of me is only doing it because I want to get back at my father who never told me I could do anything. So there's all these segmented aspects of a person, pulling them in different directions. And to me, one of the central tenets of a good coaching program is for the client to become more coherent with themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what was just on the tip of my tongue. I was going to ask then, is there a sort of, do you see a place where there's a shift where someone becomes more integrated, or suddenly a clarity emerges, which maybe like, yeah, unites these different parts, or the tension drops away between them?
Right, I do. reading a few things recently. Do you know? You probably have run across her work, Suzanne Cook-Werder's work.
Oh, very, very much love it. I've been diving into it for quite a few years. Yeah.
Yeah, some mutual friend introduced Susanna and I years ago. Really, have you met her as a person?
Never. No.
Oh, she's a terrific human being.
Mm.
She's a wonderful person. She's a real scientist. She's super curious. She's always wants to find out, well, how do you see it? And she's willing at a moment's notice to overturn everything she knows if you say something worthwhile. But it has to be really worthwhile because she really knows her stuff. Anyway, somebody sent me a 50-page something that she had written.
9 levels of increasing embrace or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I'm reading a book called The Elegant Self. We have a book study group, and you know The Elegant Self. You know everything.
By Rob McNamara. Yeah, he's collaborated with a friend of mine. Yeah, I mean, this is the work that touches me very much. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, you know, their notions of in Rob, at least the first part of Rob's book, and a little bit of the material that Susanna references is Keegan, and you know his 4 or 5 steps of development. Anyway, that was a long introduction to say yes. There's this step in our development that something maybe becoming the self-authoring self in the Keegan world, or the self-transforming self, where we start to know ourselves, not as separate from our culture, because that is never going to happen, but as distinct from it. And start to hear our own voice. So I'd say that. I'd say I'm also reading a lot these days and studying a lot Chinese medicine and Chinese cosmology. And the Chinese have a gorgeous way of talking about the heart. I don't know how much you know about Chinese medicine, but I finally found something you don't know about. It would take you like 1 minute to find out stuff I don't know about.
I was going to look it up.
You look it up. Anyway, in the Chinese system of medicine, they don't have organs like we have organs in the West. So when they say the heart, they don't mean this pumping muscle in the middle of our heart. They mean a function, a process. Anyway, the heart has 3 functions I could talk about. One is it's the place where the mandate from heaven arrives. So the Chinese have this notion that our life has a point that's been given to us from the beginning, and it's in our heart. And so that's one thing the heart does. It's the receptor of the mandate from heaven. They don't have heaven like we do in the West. It's in Christianity. It just means the wisdom of life has something it's up to in our so-called individual life, and it's in our heart. Second thing the heart does is the heart is the organ that integrates. So if we thought, as we were talking about before, we've all been trained to analyze things and put them into small parts so we can solve each part. You know, if you're going to eat the elephant, cut it into small pieces. So the heart does the opposite. The heart always encounters the fullness, the wholeness of everything.
Yeah.
So I'm still answering your question.
Yeah.
You know, what's the state? So this is awakening the heart. And then the third thing the heart does is it's, again, in the Chinese way of saying things, it's the emperor of all the other organs. So the heart has the task of receiving the mandate, what our life's about, which again the Chinese say has been given. It isn't up to us only. And then bringing up our whole life into alignment with that.
Yeah.
And then seeing the wholeness of things, knowing the wholeness of things.
Well, it touches me what you're saying, because it feels like it speaks into where we started, where being with a client and listening and participating, and maybe that heart intelligence in ourselves, being able to connect from that to our clients and tune into We talked about the self-authoring and self-transforming. It seems like that sort of sense of um, as we connect in that way, we can tune into what wants to emerge from the moment.
Yes, that's right.
Rather than
Yeah,
having a kind of separate, preordained sense of like this is that and this is that, we become much more co-created and fluid.
right. And instead of having the automatic um, triggering of problem solving that can easily arise for us as someone starts to talk, we have this different rhythm, which is settling into the intelligence and the speed of the heart.
Hmm.
The other thing I'll say about Chinese medicine, of course, there's a million things to say. They don't have cause and effect. They have a word that we use a lot these days in the West, resonance. So the way, say, a Chinese physician would help heal a patient that came in our world, a client that came in, is they would be settled in themselves, and their own settledness starts to affect the person, their client, their patient.
Mm.
So we as coaches, if we are settled we've cultivated an intelligence, a presence in our heart, and when we're with someone, that will start to awaken that person's heart, because of course our heart and the other person's heart aren't really separate.
Mm.
And when they're together, physically, kind of close, although it does work this way too, it works electronically, then the other person's heart starts to open up, and then we have this kind of intelligence that we wouldn't have if we were each in our separate offices or homes or something, typing on our computer, what should we do?
Mm.
Different.
I mean, I'm lit up hearing what you're saying. It seems like this is such an important perspective for our times, and a relief. I know. I just noticed. I feel a relief inside of me, and I think, I don't know if this is what I'm seeing in my own life a lot, but this kind of separatedness and kind of chasing of more and trying to solve problems and to get things and having a transformational agenda for my client, and then this just feels very different. Like it's got a sanity to it and a wisdom and a poetry that feels whole.
Right. Exactly. And that's part of the trouble with goals. So often goals split us apart. So we just saw the Olympics, and I don't know if you are into watching such things, but certainly some of the things that people do are so amazing. If we watch the gymnasts or the divers or people in many sports, they're just, how can they do that? Well, one of the reasons they can do that is because they haven't been doing anything else since they were 5 years old.
Yeah.
And now they're 20 and they're 25, and how marvelous. But then what happens when they're 35 and 45 and 55? That's the trouble. As these many, we've all heard stories of people trying to make the transition and back to a whole life.
Yeah.
With had a very narrow life. Same thing happens with people in business, as you and I know, or people who get so narrow because they feel that the goal is the most important part, and they throw their whole self, including all their relationships and all their potential, towards this one thing.
Yeah.
And whether they get it or not, they've made themselves into a narrow person.
Like something comes up for me, I'll try and articulate it, and it's something I've noticed in my own life at times where there is a longing, or there's a wanting of something, but actually in the end, sometimes that wanting of that goal, and maybe we're going back to what we already said, can actually potentially create more suffering than
Right.
than not. And I think that what that's brought up in my own coaching is, because clients like the idea that I can maybe help them do really big things and achieve these big goals, but often I think that can create a sense of lack or like a deficiency, and so it maybe comes back to that question of what's the real why of this. But it seems like a contradiction in coaching sometimes. I don't know if you could speak into this a bit.
Well, to me, it seems coherent that we pull ourselves into parts, then we identify ourselves as a part, and the part, because it's separate, isn't too smart. It's as if we let one part of us run everything. Like the part of me that's really afraid. Okay, I'm really afraid. So what will have me not be afraid? Well, if I had a whole pile of money, or if I had a whole bunch of admiration, or if I was in some position of power, or if I had this person who I've been watching at the cafe, if that person was in love with me, then I would never be afraid again. So instead of questioning, what's the nature of fear? How do we work with fear? We look for, instead, our imagined notions of what would have it go away. Yeah. It's dealing, in other words, with the symptoms of it without dealing with the cause.
Yeah.
It's like if someone shows up with measles and we start giving lotion to take care of the red spots on their face or their arms or wherever it is, instead of dealing with the underlying illness. But that's often how we are as coaches. People come in and they say, I have these red, itchy bumps in my arm. Okay, well, I can get rid of those. Without, where do they come from? Where does the fear come from? Where does this desperate desire to have something coming from? And as you know, we can't ask that like, hi, how are you? Where does this deep longing come from? There has to be, more trust and more repair and rapport and so on. But it's something that we can, as coaches, open up ourselves to, wondering about it and not just going with it.
What comes up for me is, and I think, because in the summit you're going to be talking about this, about instant integral coaching and
Right.
and how people, well, you can explain it a lot better than me, but I feel like some of what we've been talking about does fit here with people being so distracted or split in their lives, and wondering if you could say a bit about that.
Right. So the notion of integral coaching is to have it be real coaching, even though there's not much time to do it. And I think that's part of the trouble that we keep getting into is we are operating in such short time frames that we don't act in a way that's consistent with our long-term good. We all have our examples of this, of just doing something like, I'll just eat this chocolate cake and, I don't know what I'll run later and it'll be better, or some crazy thing that we do. Anyway, we lose track of the whole. So the notion of instant integral coaching, first of all, it's just a fun idea that there could be such a thing, but it's mostly having the word we're using a lot today is our heart intelligence awake enough so we can get a pretty quick but a whole view of what's going on, and then the whole a sense of the whole includes what the client is ready to understand or can address right now.
Yeah.
Because even though we understand the whole, we can't address the whole. We can only address step by step.
So I get the sense of, sort of moving around, being distracted, moving from one task to the next, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed or frustrated in some way, but then being able to kind of tune in, practicing tuning in which creates maybe an alignment back with oneself, where maybe then something new becomes possible. Then I reorient myself. I take a different action, which is in alignment with that deepest longing or heart wish.
Right, right, exactly. We have to keep remembering all the wisdom that we learned in reading Thinking Fast and Slow, which I'm sure you read everything anyway. Thinking Fast and Slow, because we forget that mostly what we're wanting now and mostly what we're thinking now is because of what just happened before. So we got primed into something. And then sometimes people make huge decisions off of that.
Yeah.
Without realizing, oh, I was just in a grumpy mood because my favorite cafe was closed this morning. I was counting on them to give me breakfast, and now I'm grumpy. So when someone came in and asked me if I was going to do the project, I said, hell no. And that was it on my career.
Mm.
Yeah. So being able to, the word I think you use is tune in, is to settle here for just a moment.
Mm. Yeah.
So that means as coaches, we have to be able to do that pretty well.
Mm.
To settle in the moment as called on, as necessary for our client. This is also the kind of coaching work that happens in businesses where between meetings or just people just grab us, in the food line at work, and they start talking to us. Are we available for that, or are we off on our own thing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it really comes back to me around being a transformational presence again, being connected to some kind of presence or way of being, which is then able to perhaps see more or be more deeply connected.
Right.
So,
right.
Well, so my kind of aim for these conversations was to keep them to around half an hour. I think we're about at that time. I'm just wondering if you could say like a sentence or two about just a bit more about what you'll do in the session.
So what am I going to do in the session? I'm going to try to show that even in a brief period of time, in a very short coaching session that might be 5 or 10 minutes with somebody, like I was saying, maybe even without a big introduction, are you going to coach me now? Yes, I'll coach you now. Just in the flow of things, something substantial can happen for a person if we are available to have that conversation. And as you have been calling it transformational presence, we're here enough to be able to respond freshly and newly to the person in front of us, not give them a formula, not give them some ready answer.
Yeah.
All of that. And then the backstory is, how do we cultivate ourselves so we can be that? And then how can we learn what would help people? Because it isn't just enough to be a transformational presence. Oh, that's nice. We could be an ignorant transformational presence, and people, I could be deeply here and not be of any use to anyone. Except maybe they would settle. That could be sweet. Our nervous system would settle, and we would feel a little bit more here. But we want a transformational. We want a centered physician that when we go and talk to her, she has something to say, not just be with me here in this moment of stillness. So there's the cultivation of ourselves as a being, but there's also cultivating what is going to be helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that's. I could ask you lots of questions about that and carry on talking for longer, and maybe that's a good place to save that one for the summit itself.
We can do that.
Yeah.
If you're interested in the Chinese stuff, there's a book that's a good access point to it. It's called 5 Elements, 6 Conditions.
Nice.
By a man, Giles, Gilles. I think he's French. But anyway, that'll give you the whole, some of the Chinese stuff, some of the stuff about the heart we talked about.
Well, I want to thank you, James. I've really loved this conversation, actually.
Yeah, well, you're so fun to talk to. Thank you.
Hi, it's Joel here again. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. And if you're excited about this conversation and want to know more about how you can work in this way with your clients, then you can learn directly from James and many other powerful master coaches in our upcoming online Coaches Rising Summit. Other faculty members include Michael Neal, Otto Sharma, Katie Hendricks, Karen Kimsey-House, Michaela Bohm, Rich Litvin, Marita Friedjon, Rosamund Sander, and many more. And each of them are going to teach you the tools and approaches they use to coach others into deep change. The sessions are live and interactive, and it begins on October the 19th. So head to www.coachesrisingsummit.com to find out more. And there you can also access the other free pre-summit audios too.